Hello, this is Peter Stewart. Welcome to today's episode of Get a Better Broadcast, Podcast and Video Voice. And we've got a practical for you today, so you're probably going to need to look at the show notes to get full advantage of today's episode, because we've got a bit of a practical for you. So what you can do, of course, is you could copy and paste the part of the show notes where I've actually got the scripts there for you to do this with, and work your way through as the episode continues by looking at that script. And maybe if you've got it onto a screen, you'll be able to see where I'm going with it and what I'm doing with it. So let's consider the actual new script that's there in your show notes. And remember, some places where you will need to breathe for you are going to be different from where perhaps I need to breathe, but other points are pretty much universal, such as the end of a paragraph. Usually best to breathe at the end of a paragraph, because then you are also building in a slight pause and starting a new train of thought. Yeah? So all of those things will signify to the listener that that is what you are doing. The pause and the breath and the change of tone as well. And we'll come to tone a little bit later on. Psst, while I'm recording this, I've already written all the chapter on the tone. Okay, so we'll come to that a little later on. I know it's already written, it's already prepared, it's waiting in the in the wings. So here's our raw script, okay, and you'll be able to see it there in the show notes. Now, I don't want to necessarily read it with full kind of intonation and breath right now, because otherwise it's going to kind of spoil what it is that we're going to be working with in a few seconds' time. But you can see it there in the show notes, all right? Now, my personal first temptation would be to divide each sentence onto a new line, because that way it's easier to see the sentences as sentences rather than simply a block of text. And that helps your eye, because then it's easier for you to see how long you've got to go before you can take a breath if you should want to. Yeah? And if you don't want to at the end of that sentence, you can automatically see how long it's likely to be, how many words time it's likely to be until there's another breath possibility. Yeah? Otherwise, if it's just a block of text written as a paragraph, when actually it's 4 sentences, I'm thinking maybe a news story or a commercial voiceover script, it's difficult for you to get that internal gauging, yeah, which is automatically going to put you at a disadvantage for your breathing and therefore your intonation, and therefore you're likely to panic a little bit and your voice might go up, or you might start to sound a little bit stressed as you get to the end of a sentence, something like that. Okay, so that's the first thing I personally do. Now, not everyone does that. Up to you. Personal choice. My just advice. Incidentally, I have been in newsrooms where they've written everything in capital letters, which to me was just a whole block of words. Because, again, if you've got the correct capitalizations within a script, why would you write everything as capital letters? It was just bizarre. If you've got the correct capitalizations, you can tell when someone's name is coming up, or a title, or a place, or something like that. So you know, as we'll see in a few weeks' time, about intonation, those are usually the kinds of words that you lift in a script like that. And also, it gives you the possibility, if there is something you particularly want to stress, like that, then you can write that in capitals. But of course you can't if everything's in capitals. Yeah, okay. So divide all of those sentences into a new line. And immediately you'll be able to see, as you probably can in the show notes, that each sentence on this script we're working with today is virtually the same length. If you read each one, you'll see that may make the rhythm of the read of each sentence very similar, possibly sing-songy or like reciting a poem. Now, I will read this story and highlight the kind of trap that you can get into when each sentence is virtually the same length. Here we go. New data has revealed car production in the UK fell to its lowest September level for a quarter of a century. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders said just under 115,000 cars rolled off production lines last month. The industry says uncertainty caused by the pandemic and a potential no-deal Brexit is undermining confidence. Mike Hawes, the Society's chief executive, says the overall outlook for the year is bleak. Now, okay, I did that deliberately in that kind of sing-songy way to make a point, but you can see that you can get into a trap of repeating the same kind of intonation when all your sentences are of a similar length. Now, to guard against falling into that trap, if you can rewrite it to have the sentences of varying length. And while you're doing that, you can perhaps tighten it up, reduce the words and the syllable count as well. Obviously, the style that you finish with needs to fit with the required format of your radio station. And if this is a commercial voiceover script, you won't be able to do any of this. But for the sake of this exercise, let's go for it. And you will now be able to see also in the show notes how I've rewritten this story. To cut down on some of the words and the syllables, make it more reader friendly, and also vary the sentence length as well. So we've changed the rhythm, partly by combining a couple of sentences. We've shortened and deleted several words. We've omitted Mike's title, if you're allowed to do that, with the style of your radio station, and also the repetition of the thought that uncertainty is what undermines confidence. Now we can put in some breath breaks, particularly in that first and second sentence. So to do this, think of the different phrases, the blocks of words, the thoughts that naturally go together. And you'll be able to see, again in the show notes, where I've put a single and double slash marks. So a single slash mark is likely to be where you're maybe just going to pause. You could take a little snatch if you wanted to. And a double slash is where you're more likely to take a longer pause with a proper breath. And you'll end up with a marked up script for breaths and breaks that look something like there in the show notes. Now yours may be slightly different. Most people don't actually need a break in that last sentence, for example, as it's one thought and likely to be one breath. And you end up with something like this. Car production in the UK has fallen to its lowest September level for a quarter of a century, with just under 115,000 cars rolling off production lines last month. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders says it's because of uncertainty caused by the pandemic and a potential no-deal Brexit. The Society's Mike Hawes says the outlook for the year is bleak. Now, you probably heard my breaths there. You would have heard a slight pause and a slight breath with that single slash and a longer pause and a bigger breath. I don't mean hopefully it wasn't louder. It was just a bigger breath for me as that air dropped into my lungs with the double slashes. Okay, quite a long episode today, but that's usually the way when we're actually looking at specific scripts. And we've got another script to look at tomorrow with more about marking up for breaths. Okay, hope that made sense. Hope you got something out of this today. It's something, and I've been in radio news reading and presentation for donkey's years. And no one goes through this with young reporters and newsreaders and presenters. So, I mean, you may have found someone that goes through it, but you know what? It is not usual. It is not run of the mill. So I urge you, grasp this opportunity with both hands, that I'm giving you this advice, these thoughts, these ideas, this training, this coaching for free every single day. From London, I'm Peter Stewart.